Hello, I'm Jason Stein from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. I'm your host for today's WisPolitics.com virtual event on the budget challenges facing local governments because of the pandemic and the recession. I want to start out by thanking our generous sponsors. They are Hush Blackwell, American Family Insurance, Xcel Energy, Walmart, AARP Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Hospital Association. Today's format is very simple. I'm going to ask some questions of our guests. The guests are going to answer them, and you're going to get your chance to ask questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. I'll do my best to include some of those too. So here's our panel. In alphabetical order, we have Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, Waukesha County Board Chair Paul Decker, Green Bay Mayor Eric Genrich, and Wausau Mayor Katie Rosenberg. Not quite the four corners of the state, but pretty close. So we'll go through our first question. And this one goes first to Mayor Rosenberg. Big picture, how badly was your budget hit in 2020 and how is 2021 shaping up? What revenues took a hit? What did you have to cut? How much did you have to dip into reserves? In short, from 30,000 foot view, what were the biggest challenges?
Well, I feel like I'm probably going to be the most optimistic person you hear from today. We were hit a little bit when it comes to room tax. We don't have people coming in for festivals. A lot of that stuff was canceled. But, a lot of our revenues remained pretty stable. So I did some things coming into office in April. I froze new hires and things like that. But really, we were able to kind of move forward thanks to help from the CARES Act, and thanks to some of the other grants that we were able to capitalize on. So we're doing okay. 2021 looks okay too, assuming there isn't some surprise from the state legislature like a repair bill, and assuming the state aids that we're getting, we had a minimal increase. So that actually looks good for us. Overall, we don't have large stadiums. We don't have a large convention center. So we're pretty good. So I feel cautiously optimistic, assuming that we can turn this around, get a vaccine, get our economy rolling again.
And now, County Executive Crowley.
Well, when you think about the history of Milwaukee County, we always started in the hole. For the past 8 years, we started with about a $30 million budget gap. But because of COVID this year, we had about a $42.5 million budget gap. And I would tell you that it was extremely tough trying to bridge this particular gap to make sure that we can continue to provide those services while also being on the front lines of this pandemic and supporting many of our local municipalities. But I will say that because of the CARES funding that we received, we've been able to deliver and not make major cuts to this particular budget while still providing those critical services. But while we're optimistic about this particular budget, when we look at 2021 and 2022, and we think about these upcoming budgets, we're going to have a huge problem. We don't know what those revenues are going to look like. We're assuming that we're going to see a drop possibly in property taxes. So we have to be cautious as we continue to move forward into the next year and continue to fight for more federal funding.
We'll come back to that property tax question. Chairman Decker.
Like Mayor Rosenberg, also have an optimistic view of this. We have found that so far, the COVID challenge has not hurt us from a fiscal impact because we've used the CARES funding, like she said, in terms of being able to fund the majority of the work we did with attacking COVID. And that was putting in a very, very robust contact tracing program, utilizing our people across departments like never before in terms of building new skill sets and helping the Health and Human Service Department get a hold of people, try to take care of people. So we've utilized that, and the CARES Act funding has definitely helped us build that contact tracing. We've also done a lot of work with our local municipalities to work with them, our school districts, and the business community. So we see that as we haven't seen any sharp drop off as far as our tax revenues. We are the largest county, largest population county that doesn't have a sales tax in Wisconsin. So we've had no harm there. So we have not seen any significant drop. We anticipate 21, we've already done our 21 budgets, and our 21 revenues are very, very stable. And the baseline to our economy going forward is very stable. And like you brought up, we have some concerns, and like Executive Crowley brought up, regarding some of the items in the service economy. But other than that, we feel very, very strong and very, very optimistic.
Okay, Titletown is never last, but they are pulling up the rear this time. Mayor Genrich.
Yeah, I think we're probably somewhere in the middle. You know, we're doing all right. We feel pretty good about how things look going into 2021. With regard to 2020, we certainly saw a reduction in revenues associated with hotel room tax. And the way that we dealt with that, similarly to what Mayor Rosenberg was saying, you know, certainly took a really tough look at some open positions and kept them open a bit longer than we would have wanted to in an ideal world. But we dealt with it that way. Another way to reduce spending was, unfortunately, by reducing some of the parks programming that typically occurs in Green Bay, partially for public health reasons, partially because, you know, we just didn't have the dollars to operate those programs this year. So, you know, moving towards the end of the year, we're going to be in the black. So we feel good about that. Moving towards 21, again, because of those reductions in hotel room tax, reductions in revenues associated with interest income, those two sources of revenue amounted to about $800,000 that we're missing out on moving into 21. So we had to readjust things there. You know, we're moving forward with a 2.8% property tax increase in 21, which is, you know, higher than I would have liked to have proposed and to be signing into law, but felt strongly that we needed to maintain our services, especially our public safety services. So that's kind of where things stand. It was, you know, very much a status quo budget. You know, there weren't a lot of new initiatives proposed. We were adding back 2 police officers to provide crisis intervention trained responses. We have an existing team that does that work. We're able to double that because of this investment. You know, thankfully our council went along with that proposal that was put forward by the chief and myself. But other than that, you know, it's pretty much just maintaining what we have here.
Well, in these kind of circumstances, that's pretty, you know, that's pretty favorable compared to, I think, what some of us thought might be happening in April or May. You know, you mentioned property taxes, a couple of you. In Wisconsin, more than 90% of all local taxes are property taxes. And on the one hand, I think that's been a benefit to local services in the state because they've been stable in a way that income and sales taxes in Wisconsin and around the country have not. On the other hand, you know, what a worker or a business, whether the worker is unemployed or the business is no longer profitable, that they still have those property taxes that they have to deal with. And so the question is, do you expect difficulties collecting property taxes? Have you experienced already, or do you expect to see difficulties collecting property taxes over the next year? And I'll start with David and Paul, because in Wisconsin, counties have that primary responsibility of handling delinquent property taxes.
Well, I can tell you that, you know, we've been in some conversations with many of the village board presidents and mayors already about this right now, particularly this year. And again, I think that right now we're in an okay place. But when you think about these types of hits on your economy, we don't really see what's going to happen until the year after. And I think we're looking to see what happens again in 2021. But again, this is why we're talking about the need for more resources locally, particularly here for Milwaukee County. We're in a very unique position on being the front lines and providing critical services. And so, you know, we have to make sure that we're working well with all of our partners here within southeastern Wisconsin, because we know many residents are taking a hit.
Paul, what are you seeing?
Well, again, to reiterate, I think what County Exec Crowley said, we have the same right now. Yeah, it's very stable. We had, it didn't affect 20. We look at 21 as very stable. Real estate values in Waukesha County continue to actually rise. Our unemployment is back down. we are getting back close to where we were pre-COVID. We dropped below 5%. We have a challenge out there in certain industries because of our manufacturing base. We have a very stable economy, the underlying part of our economy, and it's a very broad manufacturing base. So many people have jobs, and many of our employers are looking for additional people. That's helping our property values hold very well. So again, we don't anticipate that when we set up for COVID, and we did a lot of robust working. We talked with our school districts, we talked with our municipalities to see what's going on there. So far, they've given us some very, very good information that things, again, for now are very stable. And as the county exec said, you get to the end of 21, we'll see where we are with that. And that's really forecasted out right now. We are not anticipating huge drop off at this time.
Well, obviously the mayors are not as much on the front lines of collecting those delinquent taxes, but are you seeing, either of you seeing anything there that is either reassuring or concerning?
Yeah, I would say in Wausau, we are actually seeing something interesting. You know, one of the big predictors in tax collection are the sewer and water utility bills. And we're
sure.
actually seeing more people paying these off. We have fewer delinquencies. So we're optimistic about what's happening. We saw people paying it off using some of their stimulus funds. So I don't have any reason to believe that we're moving in a different direction, but that's what we're seeing right now.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, so we haven't heard any widespread reports of people being unable to pay their property taxes. But what we have heard is issues with collecting rental income. Partially because of the moratorium that's been in place, partially because there's just not a lot of business being conducted, unfortunately, in some of our Main Street retail outlets, for example. And so I think there's a possibility that some of that stuff could trickle up right to those property owners and property taxpayers. But at this point, we haven't heard any doom and gloom type scenarios.
Okay. Well, several of you have mentioned the CARES Act. And so this is the federal coronavirus relief act that provided assistance to state and local governments in a number of areas, including public health and transit. Would you all like to talk quickly about what that has meant for your local governments? How much have you already used your funds? Do you have some that you're carrying into 2021? I think that's certainly the case. I know with Milwaukee County, at least to some degree. And is there additional federal help that you're either expecting or seeking? So, Mayor Rosenberg, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Yeah. So we have already spent all of our CARES funding, and we used it on, sometimes in the case of lost wages, when we had entire teams that went down because of COVID quarantine. We used it on transit, which was very helpful because we decreased the number of folks that could be riding the bus. So we needed more runs in some instances. I would say the number one thing that I would beg of the federal government when they get back together to talk is that I think we need a business bailout. Right now, we're really struggling. These businesses, they're open, but they are not doing well. And it's not because of mask mandates. It's not because of occupancy issues. It's because people are scared to go out there and eat. They're scared to go shopping. So that's the number one thing that I'm hearing from our Main Street is that they need help. And that's the biggest issue I'm seeing.
Okay, Chairman Decker.
Yeah, we've used our CARES funding for testing, contact tracing. We've used it in combination with our school districts to help them in terms of coordinating contact tracing. And we went in with the idea of what do we have to do to keep our businesses and keep our schools open. So if we contact trace well, we can minimize large chunks of time that people are out and try to squeeze that down. We've also done a lot of public health messaging so people follow the CDC guidelines, 6 feet apart, things like that. And quite a few other items. So we've used it very well. We are getting creative because we're getting at the end of the year. We'll try to get some rollover of what we have left, but it's very costly. The contact tracing part, we hired over 200 some people just for that in the county. So that has been an innumerable cost. So the idea of where do we go from this? As Mayor Rosenberg said, we're asking the federal government, please give us some indication of what you're going to do. We also have a CDC grant that we're going to be using to continue contact tracing in 21 to keep that off the county costs at this point. Now, if action isn't taken by Congress and the state, we have real challenges. And I have to agree with Mayor Rosenberg. We need help on Main Street. It's not the large industries. We need help on Main Street. And those businesses, we've got to do something that has a focal point that can help them. The winter is going to be tough in all those business areas.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key questions that I'm watching is, if there is an action, what happens in January? Hitherto, I think things have been going really, frankly, better than any of us could have hoped, at least on the fiscal side. I'm not talking about the public health side, but on the financial side for local governments, back in April and May. But, what happens going forward? County Executive Crowley.
Yeah, I mean, we had to get creative and innovative the way we spent these dollars. We've allocated, well over 70 million of the money that we've got, both from the state government as well as the federal government. And we've put a lot of these dollars into sanitation, PPE as well. But we also we knew and identified that the community needed help as well. So we had eviction prevention programs. Wanted to make sure that those who own their own homes could continue to pay their mortgages as well. But we also needed to make sure that businesses had some assistance. Just recently, we've helped just over 1,800 businesses that applied for county dollars, and that's about $12 billion alone to assist. But when you think about, just like the mayors and the county executive, the chairman just said, we need the resources. When you think about staying ahead of the curve, continuing to provide the capacity as it relates to testing, making sure that we can distribute the vaccine equitable across the state of Wisconsin, because we have to lean on one another, but it's going to take the state government to step in right now. And if we can't get anything by the end of this year, I would hope that at least the governor, as well as the state legislature, continue to work together to see what they can provide almost as an insurance policy for the rest of us, because we don't know what's going to happen after once 2020 is over.
Mayor Genrich.
Yeah, and I would certainly echo everything that has been said. We're very grateful for the CARES funding that came to us, and thankful to our federal legislators and Governor Evers and his staff for distributing it in the way that he did. We were able to assist our transit with those revenues, afford some of the overtime associated with COVID response for our first responders. We made some significant investments in remote work capabilities and upgrading our Wi-Fi and some other things like that. We significantly upgraded our HVAC system here in City Hall, adding an air filtration system, which we know is really important in the age of COVID. So that's all been really helpful. But obviously you weren't able to replace any lost revenue with those CARES dollars. That would have allowed us to stave off a property tax increase or dramatically reduce what we proposed in 2021. So that would have been nice to see. We did see some enhancement in our community development block grant allocation and additional kind of emergency allocation, but nowhere near obviously what Milwaukee County or Dane County received because of how the CARES Act was set up at the federal level. So we'll just reiterate, what's been said by everybody in that we need a significant bailout for Main Street businesses. That's desperately needed in Green Bay and Brown County, I think all across the country, because without that, it's going to be a very, very dark winter for our Main Street businesses. And I'm very concerned about what that could look like, long-term for our revenue, obviously, but more immediately for the livelihoods of these small business owners and everybody that they employ. So recently, we're putting together a letter with our local chamber to urge our federal legislators to act here, ideally before the end of the year, because time is of the essence, especially for these small business owners.
Hearing a little bit of a bipartisan theme emerge there. So looking at revenues that go to local governments in Wisconsin. Property tax is the biggest. Next biggest is state aid. And we have a couple of former assemblymen here on this panel. And so I'll start out by asking David and Eric to speculate a little bit on what they expect to see in terms of shared revenue and other state aid to local governments in the upcoming state budget, or do you expect there to be a state budget at all? With some of the polarization and challenges that we've seen. So I guess I need to call on one of you, don't I? You're both too polite. That's the problem. County Executive Crowley.
I was going to say I can let the most senior member on the from the legislature go, but I think you pose a really excellent question. I'm not sure what's going to happen when you think about the polarization. I also think that this is a very unique opportunity that we all have when you think about the need that many local municipalities have when you think about the revenues that we need. And also the state mandates that have been coming down the pipeline that we consistently have to pay for. And so, for me, what I am hoping is that we can continue to build a broader coalition across the state of Wisconsin about the needs for local municipalities, whether we're talking about, a local option sales tax or finding some ways to provide more tools for local municipalities. Otherwise, we're going to continue to go to the state of Wisconsin asking for more shared revenue. And it's not sustainable. And so, we cannot, particularly here in Milwaukee, if things stay the same, it doesn't change the trajectory that we're on, meaning that we won't be able to survive or even, do the things that we find our local priorities because the increase in state mandated services. So, it cannot stay the same. Things have to change, but it will be interesting to see what this next year, holds for us all.
Well, in terms of, you mentioned sustainability, we'll be publishing a little brief on Monday or Tuesday that will look at the state budget. And it's clear from that, there is a shortfall that the state is facing. And I think that's going to make it difficult for the state to increase aid to local governments. We'll see. I mean, it may be possible to maintain it. Mayor Genrich.
Yeah, as a recovering state representative, I'd be happy to offer my perspective. I think we just need to expect that there's going to be a state budget, right? I mean, there's a state budget every 2 years. It's incumbent upon our legislators and our governor to get together and make that happen again. So that's, kind of my position on whether or not we're going to see a state budget. But on this question of the revenue mix at the state level, would echo what Executive Crowley said 1,000%, and really appreciate the work of the Policy Forum on this question. For those of you that didn't read my article in the September issue of Municipality Magazine, which I'm sure is a small number, it was titled "Overtaxed and Underfunded," right? Which is kind of the way that I look at our reliance or over-reliance on property taxes. As you said, Jason, it came in handy as we move through this pandemic because it is a stable source of revenue, and so you don't want to be overly dependent upon sales tax revenue or any other revenue source that bounces up and down. But if we had access to sales tax revenue, we would be able to make those long-term investments that are so needed here in Green Bay and I think around the state by and large. We need a new police department, a new police station, new public safety building. We need at least a couple new fire stations. We have no ability to make those investments given what we understand, listening to our financial advisors. We have statutory authority, but we're already borrowing, significantly more than we have in the past and don't want to do any more of that. So I think there should be, in my opinion, a bipartisan way forward, a way to craft a local sales tax option that is, fiscally conservatively crafted, that allows municipalities to take that question to our voters and with that backing and make those long-term investments that I firmly believe the citizens of Green Bay would be interested in making.
Well, and let's put this question to Chairman Decker and Mayor Rosenberg. Obviously, you already mentioned, Paul, that Waukesha County has the ability under state law to impose a half a penny sales tax on certain consumer purchases in Waukesha County, and hitherto has chosen not to. What's your perspective on this question?
Again, as the mayor said, one of the things we look at is what's fiscally prudent. Right now, we've made tough budget decisions over several years that have allowed us to continue to be even and continue to, every constituent in the county gets the services they need, and we've done it with a very lean budget. The state mandates have been not always beneficial in that, but that is also something we've worked within. And we've also looked at, we look at the every year to balance our budget to get where we need to be. We've really tightened up. I have to salute our administration and our department heads. They've worked and do a lot with a little. We've been very prudent where we've spent it. But as was brought up, the real challenge, I think, for all governments is when I talk to constituents about this, yes, COVID is causing us a little bit of indigestion right now, but nothing else has gone away. We still have roads to fix, bridges to repair, mental health issues, drug issues, if anything, have been going up. So we are not getting away from any of those challenges. We still need our sheriff's department on the road, and that's a challenge. We have continually pressure on that. And yes, occasionally I get that question. It's a fair question, Jason, but at this point, we do not anticipate having to move in that route to a sales tax for the county at this point. Now, to what was brought up before by County Exec Crowley is we also are trying to work with the state in terms of what mandates are coming down, what's funded, what's unfunded, and let's even that out a little bit, because that would certainly help us, because to pass something at the state level and not put the dollars behind it, it doesn't help the taxpayer. It's going to come and harm the taxpayer at some point. And to what Mayor Genrich just said, I think we listen to our local taxpayers and what they want and don't want. And that's a privilege that every county, every municipality should have. And what do you want to do with it? And that's something we have to, I think, look forward as we examine our individual challenges. But to get to your original question, at this point, no, we do not anticipate imposing a sales tax.
Mayor Rosenberg.
Sure. So, one of the challenges of being any unit of government is the cost to continues to rise, right? So everything we did last year, or this year, I guess, will cost over $1 million more next year to do. So that's a struggle that we're working through, and we don't believe that COVID's going away. So we are kind of looking at these creative solutions. So right now we are partnering with the county on more emergency management planning, because that was one of the things that we discovered. We have kind of boilerplate plans, but what happens if a pandemic actually hits? How do we go through those exercises? So I think we're going to see more of those kinds of partnerships and those kind of shared planning opportunities, and shared services. So I think we're going to see more of that. Obviously, we listen to our taxpayers up here too, and it's a struggle for everyone. So we want to be receptive and responsive too.
Okay, and we'll come back to that shared services. I think I'll remind everybody that you can use the Q&A function to put in a question for any one of our panelists, or preferably all of our panelists. And one more before I turn to audience questions that I think is just really critical to ask at this time, and that is, do you all feel that you as local officials have adequate resources, and that you're seeing an adequate plan and direction from the federal, state, and other local governments for dealing with the pandemic in these next critical months as we enter this difficult winter? And do you see an adequate plan and funding for vaccinating, for making use of these scientific breakthroughs and the vaccines that we're going to soon have, especially for the most vulnerable among us? And I'll start with you, Paul.
Well, you phrased the question, I thought, very interestingly. What do we see? We have done we've gone ahead with our planning. I have to salute again our administration, our department heads, the people involved. We've looked at things. We've divided up into teams so that we can. I want to get this right. So we have a team utilizing across several departments, but data management. How do we manage the data? Because we want to make good evidence-based decisions, and we need the data. And we're and it's not as we all know. It's somewhat confusing from the federal government, from the state government. So locally, what do we have to do to make our data as manageable as possible? Secondly, is we're working on a weekly basis with the schools, trying to get their input. And as a result, we now have we're getting better and better information of what's happening at the school level, because that's a critical area in our county. Secondly, contact tracing is giving us information, but we are, because of the rise in cases, we are at, and like I said, it was very robust, but it's $200,000 a week, and we're stretching that. We did a lot. We opened up a lot of testing. We really worked hard at getting more testing and more available at no cost to our citizens, and that has again been successful. But it gives us the other challenges that go with that. And we've already formed a vaccination distribution team, and how we're going to tackle that. We are hoping, and I will say this is a hope, we are keeping an eye on what's going to come from the state and the federal government regarding that and further funding. Right now, we have no indication from either that what we have, but we're going ahead, we're putting aside contingency. What do we have to do to be able to adequately protect and take care of the citizens of Waukesha County? We have the resources, we can do some of that, but we certainly, we've utilized our CARES funding, we think very, very well, but they're going to have to make some decisions going forward if we're going to continue to care for our citizens the best way possible.
David, I know public health has been a real focal point for you in your time as county exec. You want to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, I hear two questions. One related to, do we have enough resources, and the question related to vaccinations. And so when you talk about enough resources, Milwaukee County, we set out a bold vision of becoming the healthiest county here in the state of Wisconsin by achieving racial equity. And we knew what the racial disparities were well before this pandemic. But what the pandemic has shown us is really exacerbated everything that we have already known. And so when you talk about what we need to do, we have to tackle this. And we're doing this through Milwaukee County with our first strategic plan in over 20 years, tackling both health and racial equity, because we know that we have to do that. And so, no, there isn't enough funding when you have a big idea as far as tackling something that has been with us that is so brand new when you think about the public health crisis. Also, when you think about, racism in general, that's been here for over 400 years. And so there's not enough resources, but it doesn't mean that we're giving up. And so, but when you think about what we're doing, we're very unique because we're the only county that doesn't have a health department. So this gives us an opportunity to work with all the other health departments, all the other healthcare systems, and provide some influence. And we've done that through our Unified Emergency Operations Center, staying ahead of this pandemic. And we're going to do the exact same thing when we think about the vaccinations and how this is going to be distributed. But I think it's going to be critical when we think about these vaccinations that the state and local municipalities and the healthcare systems are working together, intertwined, because this cannot be politicized. This is about how do we get back to normal? How do we provide people the safety that they need, to continue to live a decent, normal life and contribute to this economy.
I almost made it through this thing without forgetting to unmute myself. One of the advantages of this panel is we do have a perspective from around the state. Mayor Rosenberg, there, you're at least on the edge of the North Woods. How are things looking up there?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting being where we are right in the middle of the state when it comes to this pandemic, because there are differences in understanding of public health. There are attitudinal differences, right? So we've struggled to kind of get buy-in for some of those big public health measures because we typically haven't had to talk about those things before. So that's a struggle. But I think our health department. On the county side, we don't have a city health department. It's all Marathon County, has done a great job of working on that. They're swamped. So I do know that they're working on a plan for the vaccine. And it sounds to me like the state will kind of give those local health departments the opportunity to decide how to disseminate that. But, we're looking forward to that. I think we're going to face some challenges when it comes to buy-in to the vaccine. We've faced that in the past. So that will be a challenge, but we're here for it.
Mayor Genrich.
Yeah, and just for your benefit, Jason, I want you to know that I live about a half mile north of Highway 29. So on this question of needs for our health departments, we're in the same situation as Mayor Rosenberg. We don't have our own health department here in the city of Green Bay. We do rely on our county to provide those services. Have been really impressed with the job that they've done. Given the fact that I think our health departments have been under-resourced over the years, but it's been an interesting way to move through this pandemic, to say the least, without having those in-house public health experts advising us on what the best policies would be or should be for our citizens. And it's an interesting statutory arrangement with regard to how public health departments are authorized. You can have your own at the municipal level, you can have a joint city and county, and you can have a county health department, but you can't rewind that at all. So, I think having some more flexibility at the state level within our statutes would be helpful to reinstate, really robust local control on those questions. We could certainly use more resources, especially for our first responders, our police and firefighters, as we ask for that from our federal legislators. But that's probably the biggest need for us, is just making sure that we have enough resources to meet the overtime demands that could be coming in 21.
Okay. Well, I have an interesting question from the audience here. In terms of you all had to, local officials had to run elections in a presidential year amid an unprecedented pandemic. That starts at the municipal level, but it rolls up to the county and state level as well. What was the financial impact of trying to run these elections safely and accurately? Are there lessons learned, either financially or otherwise, for having a well-run election system in our state? And I'll start with you, Mayor Rosenberg, again, just reflecting the fact that elections start at the municipal level in our state.
Sure. Yeah. So this is something I'm really passionate about. So one of the first things I did when I came in April was I created a safe elections task force, because I figured this was going to be around for us for the presidential. So we talked through what can we do, how can we make sure that people are voting safely. You start to wonder, what are the things that we can do. So we looked around the state. We saw some really successful models. So the first thing we did was use some of that CARE funding for a giant new fancy ballot box that fits 3,000 ballots in it instead of just the 80 that we had before. So that was a big deal. And then we also did some changes when it came to, we hired so many extra poll workers to make sure we're sanitizing all those spaces. And then we also did drive-through voting. So we kind of took a nod from Eau Claire. They did a great job. And we had hundreds of people show up to vote on Friday night and Saturday morning. It was really great to see. And I think you're going to hear across the spectrum here that we had so many people voting absentee. So even just mailing those ballots out takes a lot of human power. It takes a lot of money to send them out. And then, if people if they don't sign their name right, or they don't have a witness, that takes some effort to track them down and make sure their vote is counted too. So we had 51% of our voters vote absentee, which is incredible. It's huge. And I think we'll probably see that continue. People are already asking how they can request their ballot for the spring election. And I think that means that more people in general are voting, which I'm very enthusiastic about. So if there's a silver lining, people want to have their say here.
Mayor Genrich?
Yeah, so we were fortunate to receive some grant support to administer our election in the midst of a pandemic, as that was really helpful for our needs in terms of offering hazard pay, if you will, to poll workers who are willing to step up and serve their community and put themselves at risk to some extent. So that was very helpful. We also did some similar things, had some drop boxes in the city of Green Bay that were very well utilized. Thanks to Mayor Rosenberg's example, we did do some drive-through voting for the first time on the Saturday preceding our election, which was really well received, especially by a number of seniors in the community. So hopefully, there are some lessons learned that we can implement in the future. I think to Mayor Rosenberg's point, there might be more of a new tradition being created in terms of how people vote, greater numbers of people voting absentee from the comfort of their own homes. And I think that's a great thing. My goal when I was a state legislator, as mayor, is to make sure that every single eligible voter participates in their democracy. So hopefully, having this stress test on our democracy with having to administer in a pandemic has taught us some lessons that we can put to work in the future.
Okay. Obviously, there's also a role for counties, somewhat, might argue, somewhat smaller, but anything from our two county leaders on that?
Well, I would just say, just being prepared. I mean, we have an election in the middle of a pandemic, so just making sure that all the municipalities, especially when you think about central count, do they have enough ballots? Do they have enough PPE to keep themselves and voters safe? And we work very well with all those local municipalities. And just want to say, shout out to all the workers, election poll workers, and volunteers, because a lot of them put themselves out on the front lines, because again, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and I just think that this is a new beginning, and if you compare this to April of this year, this is totally different for what elections will look like, and I think the landscape of elections are going to change.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. We sort of take it for granted that in a high turnout election, there'll be enough ballots printed, there'll be all these things in place, but it doesn't fall from the sky, does it, Chairman Decker?
Well, I think one of the things we're very proud of in Waukesha County is we had over a 90% turnout throughout the county. And to Mayor Rosenberg's point, that shows a lot of people who are empowered to vote voted, and it was a wide variety of ways they did vote. And in Waukesha County, our county clerk takes the responsibility, working in concert with all the municipalities and townships, and we lead that aspect. So making sure people were adequately trained, people were set up with the right PPE. And I will say that I voted early, and at the village of Heartland, just looking at the separation, the amount of plexiglass and how they divide up, we're really protecting the workers and the voters, and seeing how many people took advantage of that in our county, which was extraordinarily, went and voted early. And then we also had ballot drop-off boxes throughout the county that were really very sensible, not in areas that were far away from the village or city hall, so that they could stay secure. And it was a secure vote. It was a vote that was, and we are very sensitive in Waukesha County about how well we count our vote. And so we made sure that was done right. And our canvass was done extremely well. We had members from both parties and observers, and we felt that this one came off very, very well, very safe. And again, we did a lot of planning, so we kept our costs overall down, but our protection very high.
When I worked in the newspaper industry, we refer to each paper as a daily miracle. And when you think about, more than 1,800 municipal clerks in Wisconsin doing work on elections, the idea that gets coordinated, 72 counties, then state officials as well. It's daunting to think about. We had a question here from the audience about with children at home, in some cases from school, more because of the pandemic. What were they affected by lead paint or lead water pipes? And I think I would just enlarge that question to say, in the pandemic, we do have at times some children, they may be learning virtually, they may be hybrid, they may be going to school, but in terms of, all the stressors that we're seeing, substance abuse, unemployment, children maybe not having access to the meals that they've been accustomed to get from their school. What have you all been doing to try to, and what do you see as essential for protecting the children of our state? And I'll start with our two county officials, since there is this. I'll just start with you, Chairman Decker, because there is this strong county element in child welfare.
Yeah, we've coordinated very well between our Health and Human Services and our school districts, making sure that people are, again, our children especially, are adequately cared for. Keeping track, again, we utilize pieces of contact tracing within the schools for that exact reason. Who's home? How long are they home? How is this affecting the home? You mentioned substance abuse. You mentioned other challenges. Making sure that locally that we are informed well, first responders, people like that. I have to put a big shout out to our school districts and a lot of our administrators and superintendents. They've done extraordinary work making sure that people are involved. The challenge, what you brought up, Jason, is that hybrid. When do you go from virtual to reality? And within families, we have some school districts that certain schools, the grade schools are open, so the children are going there, but the high schools or the middle school might be closed, so they're home. And this is causing a problem and a challenge within the families, because we do have, and if parents are not working at home, how do they continue to work? So childcare has become a real challenge. And as I said earlier, our previous challenge we've had in this county, and I know that it's in other counties, has been foster care and other care because of children in the court system, because, again, of substance abuse. That's still a challenge, remains a challenge, and our people are very, very aware of that. But it's a cost, it's a challenge. Our people have done extraordinary, but again, we're being pushed to the ends of our capabilities of handling that. And the school districts are trying to do their best to make sure that they keep track of the children, that they're fed, that they're not abused, that they're doing the homework. And I know there's challenge. I mean, just listening to this, the teachers and the administrators, there's a challenge to some children really doing well virtually and some not. So how does that affect us going forward?
Yeah, I think that's something that we unfortunately may be living with for some time. Mm-hmm. Obviously, in Milwaukee County, the handling of child welfare is done a little differently than the rest of the state. But County Executive Crowley, if you want to just speak to these sort of issues broadly.
No, I think that, these are valid issues that we have to continue to talk about. When we talk about, being safe at home, staying safe, being safe at home is not safe for everybody. And when you think about not just our children, right, who are struggling right now, for those who are at home or have the hybrid model, we have many of our seniors right now who are isolated. We see the amount of opioids and drug overdoses rising. We see a rise in suicides. We see a rise in murders. We see a rise in motor vehicle accidents. And so when you talk about the stressors, that lets you know the need for more additional resources. I mean, one of the things that we did was, we made sure to allocate about $1.5 million towards mental health services so people can have access, to the services that they need. Is it enough? No, because we haven't been able to adequately fund mental health services. So we've been playing catch up for a very long time as a society. But, this is going to take all of us. This is going to take us to continue to lean on the federal government again about the need for these additional resources to help out, not just these businesses, but to provide the community support that so many folks desperately need. And we know that many folks will probably, you're going to see even greater need right now, because again, we're in the middle of a pandemic where, folks aren't able to move around. But once we get this virus under control in some capacity, I can definitely see an influx of people needing our services even more.
Our two mayors, Mayor Genrich.
Yeah, I would just say, coming from a relatively privileged position, this stuff is hard. We've got two kids who are in elementary school, 5th grade and 3rd grade, and it's really difficult. And so you think about this from different points of view and perspectives, to Executive Crowley's point about children who maybe aren't safe at home. I can't imagine some of the struggles that some of these families are dealing with in these challenges that these kids are facing. I think we would all agree that we want our kids back in school as quickly as possible. But from my point of view, we also want to make sure that it's being done in a way that's safe for our kids and our teachers and everybody concerned. So I think we have to continue empowering our local school boards to make these difficult decisions that they've made. I give our Green Bay School Board members a ton of credit for listening to all the voices concerned and making the decision that they felt was best for our kids and everyone else in the community. But yeah, I mean, it's a really, really difficult situation for our kids and families. And the best way to get out of this as quickly as possible, obviously, is for all of us to act much more responsibly in our personal and policy responses to COVID.
I have my high school sophomore attending school in the basement right now. I had him walk through earlier just to set the table for this part of the discussion. Mayor Rosenberg.
Yeah, so I feel this intimately. I'm married to a teacher, and we had 1 week where we were quarantined together. So he's teaching from home, and I was trying to be the mayor from home. And that's a challenge, and we don't even have children. So it's one of those things that you feel for everybody who's going through this. During the last recession, Marathon County lost 50% of their childcare centers and like the home childcare centers. So it's tough, and we're still reeling from that. And I think, one of the discussions that's come up repeatedly is we need school to be open to educate children, but we also need school to be open to have a place for them. And I think that's something that we need to grapple with as a state. Because we had kids who weren't getting meals. Luckily, we have really generous foundations and really great nonprofits around here who were up to the task of making sure every kid was fed during this whole thing and continues to be fed, depending on what's going on at home. So, it's going to be a challenge to continue this way. I hope that the legislature uses the challenges and these stories that we're sharing to be problem solvers and help us get there, especially when it comes to childcare, because it's a little different than school.
Absolutely. And well, we do need to wrap up, but I want to just throw it back to all of you, starting with County Executive Crowley, to just speak to anything that we didn't hit or something that you just want to leave our viewers with as they think about the challenges that are facing your communities in the coming months.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to learn more about things that are affecting directly in Milwaukee County. And in reality, the issues that are affecting us are no different than what's affecting many of the other municipalities across this state. And so, it's my hope that we can continue to work well with one another, lean on one another, because that's what it's going to take to get over not only this pandemic, but to start thinking about the economic recovery that we all need to be thinking about. And so we need those tools, but let's make sure that we continue to work together, put aside the partisanship to find ways to move this state forward.
Chairman Decker.
Again, thank you as well for including me on this. I appreciate it. I want to say, because it was brought up, I have to send out a very strong thank you to our nonprofit agencies in the county and throughout the area, throughout this region in Southeast Wisconsin. I've told many taxpayers many times, part of the reason that we can keep our taxes low is because of the great nonprofits we have and the volunteers. And as Mayor Rosenberg brought up, we've really leaned this during this pandemic on volunteers, not only during the election, but to make sure children are fed, our elderly are looked in on and taken care of. And we are extremely worried about that segment of our population through the next 90 to 120 days. So again, those are challenges. And as Executive Crowley has brought up, we need to all have our shoulder at the wheel on this one. The pandemic is not a partisan issue. The challenge to overcoming it is something that we're all going to have to be involved in. And for people that are just thinking the vaccine is going to solve everything, there's a lot of challenges, as brought up by both mayors, that are going to come out of this, it's going to impact education for a long time, businesses. I salute our business community. They're working with us and helping us reach many people, taking care of people, making sure if people have to stay home, that they take care of their children. They're working with them and trying, and they're shouldering that cost. It's not coming back to government. So thank you for that. And thank you, all of you, for the work you continue to do in your communities, because we have to learn that we're in this together if we want to have great communities. And Wisconsin as a whole, we are a great community and a great state, but we have to realize this is something we're all involved in, and we need everybody to participate in getting over this, getting through this.
I got such a good point to think about. We have a long ways to go before we're done with the pandemic. And even then, we're going to have after effects that are going to reverberate through the lives of so many people, businesses, children, parents. Mayor Rosenberg.
Yeah, I guess thanks for hosting this. This has been really great to hear from folks across the state. It's easy to think you're on an island and you're facing these challenges alone when you're just got your nose to the grindstone here. And big thanks, massive thanks to our essential workers, our hospital workers. They are so challenged right now. And I want everyone that's listening to this right now and in the future, keep at it, keep at these common sense public health protocols, wash your hands, wear your mask. It's super important. It will help lessen the load on these hospital workers. But I guess moving forward, I think we have learned where we're challenged. We didn't expect the pandemic to be politicized, and yet it kind of was. So I think it will be on all of us elected across the state, and we're in a special position as nonpartisan elected officials, even though we might have partisan inklings, to kind of continue that message that we need to work together to get this done. We need to find these collaborations, we need to partner together, and we have to keep our eyes on that goal, and that's to be as safe and healthy and prosperous as we can. So that's going to be my message moving forward into 2021 and beyond.
Mayor Genrich.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. This was a great conversation. I always, like Mayor Rosenberg said, enjoy getting together with colleagues around the state and just learning from your experiences. It's super valuable. I would just kind of echo what Executive Crowley had said in terms of, the vision for the future. I think everything that he laid out from Milwaukee County is really inspiring. And I think, we need to be able to articulate our visions in every corner of the state in a way that's realizable in partnership with our state and federal government. And just to quickly go back to that revenue mix question, I don't think we can be as bold as we need to be. I don't think we can be as visionary as our residents are calling us to be unless we are more innovative in the way that we fund government. We just don't have the equipment to meet those infrastructural challenges that are in front of us here in Greater Green Bay without access to a local sales tax, for example. So I would just encourage, all local officials and state officials and federal officials to be as collaborative as possible, to be, as Mayor Rosenberg said, problem solvers. We have no choice at the local level. That's what we have to do, is solve problems, and that's what we do every day, and we love doing it. But we would just ask our state and federal legislators to join us in that, because I feel incredibly optimistic about the future of Green Bay and the future of the state of Wisconsin. But it's going to require all of us to get together and make it happen.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I think the thing that I'm always struck by when you hear from local officials is you do get this optimism, you do get this spirit of wanting to get things done in their communities, because they are so tied to that their governance really affects the places where they live and work directly. And so I think that can be a breath of fresh air to hear from leaders at the local level. So thank you to all of our panelists, Mayor Rosenberg, Mayor Genrich, County Executive Crowley, and Chairman Decker. I certainly have a lot to take away from this. And thank you to our sponsors, Hush Blackwell, American Family Insurance, Xcel Energy, Walmart, AARP Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Hospital Association. Thanks to WisPolitics for giving me a chance to moderate this panel with all of you. This is Jason Stein from the Wisconsin Policy Forum signing off. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you soon.